My name's Kurt Hansen. I am a publisher of RAIN, Radio and Internet News, and also CEO of a company called AccuRadio, which is a personalizable webcaster. I'll tell you a little bit more about later in the week, next couple days. I'll be your host during the radio sessions, and I'm glad to be part of this. Last year at Canadian Music Week was the first time the conference tackled one of the most important problems facing broadcasters in coming years, and that's the changing face of the car dashboard. And that topic is so big that even with 2 hours last year, it wasn't enough time to handle all of the issues that arise. So we're going back at it with maybe an even better panel this year on the subject. We're welcoming as the moderator one of Canadian Music Week's favorite people, a longtime supporter of the conference. He runs his own conference every year in Detroit that's dedicated to the connected car. So please welcome the president of Jacobs Media, Fred Jacobs.
Thank you, Kurt. And good morning, everybody. Glad you could be here. Yes, we did a connected car session last year, and it went so well that we got invited back with a completely different cast of characters who I think you will get to meet and enjoy what they have to say. I think the real reason that there is another connected car session here at this conference is that the space has become even more important today than it was a year ago at this time. It's also changing quite a bit. And so we're going to talk a lot today about how the whole connected car space is moving, what it means to you in radio. I'm assuming we have a lot of radio people here in the room, and you're in the right place. So I just live about 4 hours west on 401 in Detroit. Really up until the past few years, there really has been no upside benefit to living in Detroit, certainly from your point of view. But really what has happened in just the past few years is that Detroit has reasserted its importance in the auto space, and it has really been an exciting time as the whole in-car connected media segment has grown and morphed and changed, and it obviously has a great deal to do with where radio is headed as well. As Kurt mentioned, we have done a conference in Detroit the past couple of years. We're doing it again in November called DASH. And DASH is sort of a mashup of automotive and radio. It's kind of a unique deal. So we've learned over the past few years that the connected car space is sort of a tipping point for radio. And again, today we've got a group here, very diverse from all different sort of walks of media, entertainment, and car life to talk with you about what the space means to them. There is so much happening in the connected car space at this point. Can we get, there we go. So yeah, every time you turn around, you open up the trades, there's all these articles about what is going on in the connected car space, what does it mean to radio, and frankly, a lot of the articles that are written are kind of scary, you know, sort of like this New York Post piece, and the New York Post is scary anyway. If I could have tinted that yellow, it probably would have been kind of smart on my part. But yeah, there's just so much being written and a lot of contradictory ideas about the car that one of the things we're going to do today is hopefully straighten some of that out for you, because this is really, I think, a critically important intersection. Radio and cars have always gone together. In the States, I say like peanut butter and jelly. Now I know here in Canada it's half white and fries. I actually had dinner for the first time last night at Swiss Chalet. Yes, courtesy of Greg Simpson, and it really was damn good. At least now I feel like I've been kind of indoctrinated into Canadian culture a little bit more than I ordinarily would be coming from Detroit. Here's why this is critically important. If you're in the radio industry, whether you are in programming or sales, it matters a ton. This is a slide from our newest tech survey. This is a survey of 220 radio stations essentially renting us their email databases for about 72 hours so that we can administer a survey. We get more than 41,600 respondents this year. And so, here's an important finding. over half of our overall sample say that all or most of their radio listening occurs while they are in a vehicle. So the car is critically important. You've got it broken out here by format so you can kind of get a sense of where all this kind of lays. But I think the bottom line is here, all these levels are pretty high. And so the car, from a programming standpoint, is the critical location. Now, the other piece of this is that generationally, the younger the generation, the greater the likelihood that the lion's share of their radio listening takes place while they're in vehicles. So that's for the programming department. The sales department is essentially the same story, just laid out with different numbers. This is from the American Radio Advertising Bureau. This goes back now to 2009, showing the most important categories for revenue generation for all of radio. National sales, local sales, everything in between. And you can see that automotive has led the league all the way through 2013. They just put out their 2014 numbers. They put them out a little bit differently. So I know automotive is number one. They've kind of gotten a little hinky with exactly the way they report the data, but all you really need to know is still number one. So that's why whether you're in programming, in sales, in management, online, whatever aspect of the radio station that you work in, the car really is a critically important element. And what's interesting about it is this is something that is sort of snuck up on the radio business. I mean, we saw streaming coming. We had a sense even in the early MySpace days that social media was going to be a big deal. I mean, all of these things were kind of expected, but the car has always been almost an entitlement to radio, right? You remember getting your learner's permit and sitting in the car, buckling your safety belt, starting the car, turning on the radio. So that's why this is such an important space, and what we're going to do now is actually kind of climb inside the head of the car industry and share with you some insights that this group has about the connected car and what it means to radio. So I'm going to start here with Michael Hill. They're all going to introduce themselves and talk for just a moment about what they do, why they're here, and why the connected car space and radio is so important from their vantage point. So, Mike, it's all yours.
Okay. Hi, I'm Mike. I run Radio Player in the UK. I've worked in radio for 25 years, most of it in the BBC. I've worked in what I'd call proper radio. What do I mean by that? Well, in content terms, I've done a lot of journalism. I've worked on music stations. And I'd say proper radio, we all know it when we hear it. It's what comes out of the studio on a day when the team are really flying, and it's what works brilliantly in a car as well. So content terms, very important. Distribution, I've worked on AM stations, FM stations, DAB stations, online stuff. I can tell you the listener neither understands nor cares how the signal gets to them. They don't give a damn. What they want is reliable delivery, particularly to a moving vehicle, and this is again, where radio has a huge trump card when we're on the top of our game. We can deliver very cheaply, very high quality audio to moving vehicles. We have been able to do it for decades, and it'll be 5 to 10 years before mobile networks can do the same. And the third thing, which is where I think we've dropped the ball recently actually, is the interface. So this could be a radio, it could be a screen, it could be a phone, but how people access our content. And I don't think we're doing very well in this area. And that's why 4 or 5 years ago in the UK, the BBC got together with commercial radio and formed Radio Player. It's a model that's now spread to Germany, Austria, Ireland, Norway, Belgium. It's about broadcasters collaborating to crack these really important questions. And right at the top of our list right now is connected cars, both aftermarket and line fit. So that's why I'm here today.
Thanks, Mike. Next up is Chris Andrews from Visteon in Detroit. So what's Visteon?
Visteon is what we call a tier 1 supplier to automotive. We supply the electronics, focusing mostly on the cockpit, so the things that you have inside the vehicle, not so much the powertrain. But the reason that's important, and we have talked about various parts of this, is what used to be, I run a group called Emerging Technologies at Visteon, and what's interesting is what traditionally used to be what we call a radio or a display or a cluster like the speedometer. My group is really focusing now more holistically, as the cell phone industry has, as all successful consumer products have on the experience in that vehicle, on the experience to the consumer. If the technologies that we're developing don't mean something and improve the lives of the consumers, then we've kind of missed our mark. We're just doing it for technology's sake. So my group is to improve that experience for the consumers and provide value there. Like you said, we haven't always done that correctly as an industry. There's plenty of examples out there, but there's some newer examples on how this synergy can work right. The interesting part is there's plenty of work to do because the world gets more complicated with vehicles talking to each other, with smart cities, with the Internet of Things, with people wanting this, their digital lifestyle, we call it, when they want it, how they want it. They really don't care what medium it uses to get to them. We all want to be able to have our digital lifestyle. So bringing that into mobility or a vehicle is what we're working on at Visteon.
Thanks, Chris. Next up, Dr. Ed Cohn from Nielsen.
You still have trouble saying that, don't you? It's been
I know. I
Arbitron
keep
for so
almost
many years.
Nielsen.
Yeah.
So yes, Nielsen, formerly Arbitron.
Formerly Arbitron. And why I'm here is that I come out of the radio business, and I've been in it for more years than I should admit. But been at Arbitron, now Nielsen, for about 15 or 16 years. Before that, at Clear Channel as head of research. I've been on at the station level, trade association, and even another ratings company that went out of business 20-some years ago. But about 3 years ago, I got this weird idea about connected cars and how there's something going on there that's going to affect the radio industry, and potentially something to measure it to, whether it needed to be measured. So I went to the Arbitron senior management and said, there's something here. And they said, okay, go learn about it. And I had to become an automotive guy because, let's face it, Arbitron didn't know a whole heck of a lot or have any expertise in automotive. So I go to a lot of conferences. I'm always the only radio person there unless there's someone named Jacobs there, because Fred and Paul are the only other people you ever see. You do not see radio people. Occasionally an engineer, but you don't see radio people at these kinds of conferences. So radio just doesn't really exist. And I've learned a heck of a lot. We've joined organizations. I'm even a member of SAE now, which used to be the Society of Automotive Engineers, but they took in aeronautics too, so you get emails about, hey, study plane crashes, because the A still works, but just things like that. Having to learn it all, there is a heck of a lot going on. The radio industry really doesn't know much about it. Hats off to Fred and Jacobs Media for trying to do Dash the last couple of years and continuing that to try to wake up the industry. As Arbitron, we brought one of the people that knows more about it than anybody, Roger Longto from Strategy Analytics, did a presentation at the radio show, the NAB radio show in 2013, trying to bring people up to speed. This is where it's going. This is what's going to happen and what could happen. So we'll try to get you some of that today.
Thanks, Ed. And Ted Kritsonis, who is the technology and media reporter for the Toronto Globe and Mail.
Yes, freelance, but...
well, that's okay. It's close enough, yes.
But I do cover the space for the Globe on a regular basis. And I kind of fell into it sort of by accident years ago, writing for Market News about the aftermarket. And over time, as the OEMs are making the cars more connected, I basically wanted to test these infotainment systems to see what they were like. And they're not good. None of them are good. I mean, I was driving $150,000 cars with systems that I would never use and I'm being honest in saying that. I also told them that too. That said something to me, that we could have amazing engineering under the hood, but not necessarily in the dash. So there's clearly a dichotomy there that still is being figured out. And as mobile gets bigger and bigger, now wearables, we're seeing all this amazing technology in our hands, in our pockets, on our bodies. That eventually will somehow play a role in the dash too, but most companies have not figured it out yet. So I just have a first-hand perspective. I've tried these out just like a consumer would, and yeah, it's a mixed bag.
Well, that's actually the perfect intro to where we're going to go. So help me figure out how we're going to move this session for the next 30, 40 minutes. As you can see, we've got a lot of firepower up here, people who come at the space from a lot of different angles. But let's talk a little bit about who's in the room here. Do me a show of hands. How many of you drive a vehicle that is truly connected? And when I mean truly connected, I'm saying, say, Ford Sync, Chrysler Uconnect, Audi Connect. You have a vehicle that actually has one of these high-end systems. Hands, please. What do you think? About 10% maybe?
Okay. 10% or less.
All right, is that, or less, okay. All right, let's try slightly different. How many of you have ever been in a vehicle, friends, a rental car, that kind of thing with one of these systems? Show of hands there. Better, right? Maybe 20%? Okay. So, good. You came to the right place. You're in the right room. Let us help you try and figure this out. And this goes exactly to where Ted was talking about before. Ed mentioned Roger Longto from Strategy Analytics, and they actually put together this highly complex chart. All you really need to know is color on this chart. This actually rates the systems for all the different manufacturers on the left-hand side. And so what you would like to be seeing here in a perfect world of great usability is a sea of green. But as you can see, there's an awful lot of yellow and red up on the screen, which means there are problems with these systems from a consumer interface point of view. Discoverability is the ability to be able to connect your phone with the system itself. HMI is the human-machine interface. See, I do go to these conferences and take notes. All of these things, as you can see, there are some serious holes in the process here, and this is really what the automakers are hustling now to try and create systems that really have a higher degree of usability and make it easier for consumers. This is my dashboard in my Ford Edge. This is my Ford Touch. Now, Ford was really the very first company that started out with these systems with Sync. And as many people in the automotive industry say, Ford sort of took one for the team. Because Sync had all kinds of problems, but it was first, so it did pave the way, but they certainly paid the price in J.D. Power ratings, right? So this is what it looks like now, and this is what it's going to look like in the fall. You can see they have really worked hard to be able to try and figure out what is going on here, how can we simplify it. It's much cleaner, there's a lot more white space. It is an easier system, and I'm sure some of you have actually seen it and played with it. They're getting there, but there's this whole sea of different systems. The deal with the auto industry is that they're very much like American radio. Everybody thinks they have the right answer, and they're all sort of running around and trying to come up with their proprietary system, none of which really communicates with the others. So that's why when you actually rent a car in Florida, you can't figure out how to turn on the radio or how to get satellite radio to work or those kinds of things because all these systems are different. One thing that you probably noticed looking at all these different systems is that the word link tests well in focus groups. I mean, that is something that obviously all of these systems have in common, but to a great degree, the lack of standardization with these systems is really what has ushered in an invasion from a couple of companies that you probably know about. One is out in Cupertino, California, called Apple, and the other one is Google, and they are creating their own systems that will connect your phone, whether it's an iPhone or an Android phone, to be able to seamlessly hook up. So that is really something that wasn't around at this time last year when we did our presentation back then, but it's very much around now. So I'm going to show you a video of what CarPlay and Android Auto look like. This was shot at the Consumer Electronics Show last year, and then we're going to talk about the system and what our panel certainly thinks is the future here. Is it going to be systems that come from the automakers, or are Apple and Google going to take over the world and take over your dashboard at the same time?
The vehicles will have not only the Android Auto or the Apple CarPlay, but also the OnStar 4G LTE that you guys may have gotten to see. This allows people to use their vehicle as a mobile internet hotspot. So that will be a compatible feature that goes along with this as well. Android users will be familiar with what this is. This looks like they're called Tiles or Google Now, where you have little, widgets about weather and recent calls, where you've maybe been in recent times. If we come here to the left, you've got your navigation. So this is the ability to produce exactly what people see on their phones as a means to bring it into the vehicle. So trying to create this idea of an extension of your smartphone, an extension of those functionalities you're familiar with into the vehicle. There's this idea that a lot of us have that, bringing your digital life into your vehicle and your vehicle into your digital life. And so trying to get that more integrated as we go. Music is a big one that we received a lot of feedback on. Customers were saying we don't only want to listen to AM, FM, XM, we want to bring in things like iHeartRadio, Slacker, Spotify, all of these common apps that we're using. And so this phone I have equipped with all of those. And if you click here, show you Spotify, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Joyride is a newer one, all of these that a customer can come in and activate. So we're listening to Forever Young now.
And this is just whatever you have loaded up on your Android phone, just is right on the screen.
Correct. So it's powered by the smartphone device and making sure customers see the same look and feel and functionality. You can see right now this is the initial launch screen. Looks and feels just like an iPhone. Rounded buttons, very large, bold colors. Even this, the home button, is exactly what you see here on my device. So when we come in here, same things of the phone, music, and navigation. So this one, if we come in, I'm going to pull up, this is iTunes Radio.
Right.
So if I pull up iTunes Radio, let's go to Pure Pop. Let's try this one out. So the look and feel is exactly the same as if you were in your iPhone. So if the same shuffle off, repeat off, any of this is the same. And it would show you under now playing whatever music selection you have.
I'm going to stop it there. I think you got a pretty good idea of how this looks. How is this impacting Radio Player? What has been your plan looking at what Apple and Android are doing? You guys are making moves.
Yeah, so this is sort of step one in the game, really, which is taking the 25, 30 proprietary dashboard systems that you talked about that every car company has. And hopefully that will boil down to 2, 3, or 4 eventually. 2 of which will be Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. And what that means is that if we're integrating our apps, for example,
The vehicles will...
we have done recently, we were the first radio apps in Europe to work well with Apple CarPlay. Can you run that video, or?
I think so.
The vehicle...
That's it. So this is me plugging in my iPhone. It recognizes that I'm about to drive, so you can put the phone down safely, and the iPhone is then mirrored onto the screen. Radio Player is the bottom right button. You can just punch it there, or you can use the steering wheel controls. It's all integrated with the dashboard properly. Straight into my favorite stations, and I can choose one. So it feels very much like an Apple experience, but this is UK radio coming through with the right logos, the right station names, and so on. So we can stop that there if you like. But basically, this is helping us get a foothold in these car dashboards, and hopefully, as I say, we'll rationalize down the 25 or 30 proprietary systems to 3 or 4.
So is this where it's going, Chris? Is it going to be an Apple and Android world in our cars? Are companies like Visteon going to stay competitive in this space? I mean, with the systems that we looked at CES, there was CarPlay, Android Auto, and GM's own system. Is that where we're headed when we start looking for cars this fall?
The jury's still out. The Apple and Google know that they own the personal device space, right? I mean, there are others, right? So Windows and BlackBerry, but in general, they have the majority of the personal device. What they have found since is that the mobility environment of the vehicles is a little more difficult than the phone. And the OEMs also would like to retain some connection of their brand to the customers, right? So somewhere in that mix is a solution of what people are very comfortable with and what the cell phone companies or the Apples and Google providers do very well, because people love that experience on their phone. So it's getting to that experience in the vehicle. And nobody quite knows exactly how it's going to happen. You can kind of play some cards and say that eventually they're going to take it over, but there are a lot of people working in that space, and to be honest, it probably will filter down to a handful of solutions, just because to make it more financially feasible. But who's going to win is the jury's still out on that, really.
So let's just talk about this. I mean, is the future pairing up our phone and porting over our content from our phones, or is it embedded apps in the dash? I mean, you guys study the space. Where is this going?
I'll go with Chris and say I don't know that anybody knows exactly where it's going to go, or if they do, I don't think I'd trust them completely. But I think all of the when you look at all the various analyst companies in the space, and there are, what, 5 or 6 of them, most of them say that given some time, it will be more and more built in, much like General Motors is doing now, and Audi is also doing it, and you're starting to see more of this. I think Uconnect, Chrysler Uconnect also has, I think they're only 3G, but it's built in. That you're going to see more and more of the car being a Wi-Fi hotspot, that you're going to have built-in Wi-Fi. We were talking about it back in the green room about, well, will people pay for it? With General Motors, if you're not on AT&T, it gets very expensive. And, you know, we're not sure that people are going to pay that much for that small amount of data. I think the car companies, the OEMs, have to offer CarPlay and Android Auto. I think there's no way around it because people are going to want it. But at the same time, I think they do want to have their own branding on it. And I don't think they trust them. I think that's what I've been hearing is, if it's Apple, Apple will find a way to take all the money. If it's Google, Google will find a way to get all the data and make all the money off of it, leaving the OEMs holding the bag. So they don't want to be left holding the bag. They've seen what's happened. So they're a little bit forewarned and maybe forearmed. So they're going to say, yeah, I think Ford made some comment recently about we're not going to become a data source for Google or something to that effect. So I think it's going to be a mixed bag. And also getting it down to 2 or 3 systems, let's hope so, but you know, getting these guys to agree on anything is next to impossible.
Yeah, I'm not optimistic at all about that. It's divide and conquer just off the bat. So Apple's pedigree has always been to basically take an industry and almost reinvent it, or modernize it, or even democratize it to some degree, with, of course, them taking all the profits. So I can see them wanting to do that with the automotive space. There were rumors, actually not too long ago, I wrote about this as well, about Apple possibly actually looking into making a car, which I don't believe that's true. I think actually what they want to do is to make a dash that all the automakers could use. And if it was good enough, then the automakers would almost have no choice, because consumer demand at that point would force them to say, fine, we'll take it, which they don't want to do. But at the same time, the automakers will never, ever come to the table and agree to anything. I mean, they can't even standardize certain ports in vehicles. So to get them to agree on things like, processors and screens and apps, not going to happen, ever.
So one more thing on that is one of the goals that we're looking at doing, and the perspective from the industry, is to provide a system. To me, I'm agnostic to what the solution is. I need to provide a system to the OEMs that is flexible enough to take on whatever wins in the market, so that the hardware and software technologies, same as they are on your phone, are up to pace enough that they're flexible enough to do whatever solution the customer wants, because they want that digital content when they want it, where they want it. Like we said, they don't really care how it gets there, right? So we want to make sure we enable
just a
that
quick
for
point
them.
on that, though, if I could. I think Tier 1 suppliers actually, like you and QNX and some others, are doing really cool things, but you basically have to build to what the automaker wants. So
That's true.
Yeah.
So let's talk.
Although they're listening more than they ever have before, I will say.
Are they really?
We're having
Okay.
much more engagements at another level.
Okay.
Now, the time frame is still out, but they realize that shortfall in the experience.
You must be very convincing, because they are very slow to move on anything.
Well,
That's true.
He is convincing. Let's look at what people really want, because one of the crazy parts about this whole thing is that we can talk about technology and we can talk about streaming radio and satellite radio and everything else, but when you isolate out people who say, I want to buy or lease a new car next year, here are the most important features that they say absolutely, positively have to be in their next vehicle. So you can see right up there, number one, I put a little heart there to make everybody in radio feel good, is that you gotta have an AM/FM radio in the vehicle. Now, a bunch of these other things, I made little lightning bolts there to kind of signal connectivity. I was bored, so that was kind of how I designated that. You can see that clearly there is an appetite for Bluetooth, these systems, wireless internet, all that, but truly AM/FM radio is thought to be essential. Problem is, and this is what I want to pose to you guys, is nobody walks into a Ford dealership and says, I want that Fusion with the AM/FM radio. I mean, that's not a dealership draw, even though everybody really wants proper radio in their vehicle. So what about this disconnect that, yes, all we keep talking about is connectivity and media and anywhere, anytime, and yet people do in fact want their local radio. Is it going away? Because that's one of the rumors that you keep hearing floating around, that the automakers eventually are going to eliminate proper radio from the vehicle. So I'll throw that grenade over here and see what you guys do.
It's not going away. Radio, AM/FM, proper radio, I love that. That is a great term. Is not going away, at least no time in the near future. I mean, that's all there is to it. We do a similar study, Harris Interactive, that Nielsen bought around the start of 2014, does something called Auto Tech Cast. And the new one is out of the field now. I've seen a little bit of the data because of something I'm working on with that. And the industry has not done a good job of defining what a connected car even is. People don't understand the term. You're going to see some things in a little bit too about that, some video. They don't understand it. They don't know what the heck a connected car is. And when you give them the various features in this other study, those that want it, it's absolutely underwhelming. I mean, I think they want it, they want to have it there, but they really don't know that they want all these individual things. I mean, I think last year's study, more people said what they wanted in the next car. All these nice connected features came in lower than I want a fuel cell. There's one fuel cell car out there right now. Toyota makes it, and there's about 10 of them floating around in Southern California. That's it. Fuel cells? Nobody even knows what they are, but they rated higher than most of the connected features. It was just shocking. Nobody gets it.
Anybody? Yeah, go ahead.
I think that goes to the fact that, yeah, I agree with you, but I think people don't care as much about the technology as I just want to be able to get to those choices, right? And I think to some extent that AM/FM radio has been, call it the stepchild, but it's a given. It's always been there. People still rely on it. If it went away, and I've seen over the last year, there's been some articles that hinted to that. I think people would obviously miss it a lot. I think it still has a major role. I mean, we've done a lot of research on this, and there are ways to improve it, right? You have DAB radio in Europe, you have HD radio here. There's certain things that you can do to improve the quality of it, but it still seems to stick around for various reasons. It's one of the options. People can play their streaming music, the music they own on their phone or whatever, but when they want that connection to the local culture, whether it's talk, whether it's news, whether it's just find out what's going on, that seems to be the place they go. It's almost like an ambassador of local culture, you know?
And that familiarity is our greatest strength and our greatest weakness, because our greatest strength is that they want that and they would miss it if it went. But our greatest weakness is they take it for granted because we've always been there. So it's like the windscreen wipers or the heater working. You know, they'd be really pissed off if either of those things broke. And they'd be really pissed off if they couldn't receive their local radio stations, but they just don't know it. And we're still the car manufacturers, you know, the guys, the 20-somethings who are building these new digital screens and stuff. They probably don't listen to much proper radio themselves. So they assume the rest of the world is swanning around in a digitally connected state with chips implanted in their brains the whole time. And actually, most people just want to listen to proper radio.
Well, those damn millennials is actually our next topic. I mean, you know, right? I mean, because what would a radio station be like if we don't talk about millennials? But as you saw earlier on, it is in fact Gen Y, millennials, that really does more listening to proper radio. we're on it now. Proper radio inside vehicles. I'm going to skip over that and go into this slide. We wanted to really find out, because one of the topics inside the auto industry is that millennials don't want to own cars. So we asked this agree-disagree statement. It's important for me to own or buy or lease my own vehicle, and you can see that everybody agrees, yes, it's critically important that I have a car. When you actually break it out by the demographic groups and go right to the generational bars there in the middle, you can see there really is no difference between millennials wanting to have a car and boomers and all the other generations. So part of that is, in fact, a misnomer. We were just kind of touching on that before. But Ed, you've done a lot of research with millennials as it relates to connected cars. And again, the automakers are just like kind of crazy about all this stuff. What is going on here?
Well, I think some of it was there was one of those call-in polls or some kind of an opt-in poll that I think the Detroit News ran a few years ago that said millennials don't want cars or something. It was just bizarre. It was just bad research. We started a study back in 2011, and I won't give you the whole reason as to why, but there are a lot of studies that have looked at, that are cross-sectional. Okay, we're going to do a survey right now or some kind of research right now. We've done them with Jacobs before. No one had done anything across time, and so we did. We started following a group of students at the University of Florida and called it Class of 2015. We started in 2011. In fact, a lot of them just graduated last weekend. And we're actually going to follow them a little bit longer to see what happens in real life. It was really meant for digital things. If you take kids from their home environment, put them in this university where high-speed everything is free, what are they going to do and how do they change across time? Well, as I got interested in automotive, we started doing some things with automotive. And here is just a short piece, I think what the first one's going to be on, is it important to own a car? This whole thing about owning cars. And you're going to hear those of us who are older who thought cars were really cool and a whole ticket to freedom, it's not as big of a deal with them.
Car rental service, if I'm guessing, or I don't know.
Maybe something where you can...
At least the friends I had, they just honestly just want something that gets from point A to point B. They are not too interested on like the nitty-gritty details.
Way less. I mean, unless it's like Lamborghini or like a Mercedes or something, like no one cares. It's something from point A to point B.
I think people are they're not more interested in like type of brand of cars, like if they're Mercedes-Benz or Audi or that, like the college student type, they're just interested in having like a efficient car that runs cheap gas and just for the sake of moving. So it's more of the interest like of having a way to get around in Gainesville rather than just like because you want to have a car.
I feel like my generation's pretty dependent on our cars. I don't know if we're like into like the aesthetics and like really, like a lot of my friends like really kind of don't care what car they have as long as it is like somewhat, current and works. But I know like we're all pretty dependent on our cars.
And that's the key point. A to B, just get me there. They don't really care that much about it. Now we're going to see if they change once they get into the real world and actually have to buy one. But for now, that's what we've seen.
Do you want to go to the next one?
Okay, the other one was this whole thing of connected cars. And we asked them, figured these kids are 20 years old, 21 years old now. They should understand what a connected car is. So we asked them, what's a connected car?
Maybe a car rental service, if I'm guessing, or I don't know.
Maybe something where you can Bluetooth connect your phone to your car or something like that.
It's like something that's trying to get into like what I think get into the market, so like people then would say use the term connected cars, and maybe it's like a different type of way of buying your cars, or maybe having the same type of cars, like they're environmentally friendly or something, and that's like what they're trying to get people to say.
To me, it sounds like one of the share like rental car kind of things, like kind of like Zipcar, but I'm not sure.
I would just assume this like Bluetooth, like connected cars, or maybe there's Wi-Fi in it or something, like in-car Wi-Fi.
I feel like it probably means a car that's fully connected, so especially in like the time we live in, so things like it has OnStar, it has the GPS built in, it's got, you know, USB ports, it's got everything right there on the screen. You know, one of those cars that you can just, you don't even have to turn around, then it's got the video so you can see when you're backing up. Like, I feel like that's what a connected car is.
A couple of them get it, a lot of them don't. And if they don't get it, go older and figure out who's going to understand it.
It's kind of scary, isn't it? Yeah.
State of American higher education, too. That's
Well, I was going to say. Well, but you know what? I think had there been a test on this, they would have done better. I mean, right? You know, if they would have at least been tested on what a connected car is, they would have done better. I want to shift gears, no pun intended, and talk a little bit about automotive marketing and some of the things that the automakers are doing. Chevy in particular is putting a lot of its marbles now on the Wi-Fi hotspot concept, where as many as 7 different devices can now be connected through the car. You guys were talking a little bit about this earlier in terms of data charges and all that, but I wanted to show you a new commercial that Chevy is using in order to market this, and then have you guys comment on, is this where it's all going?
We hid cameras in 2 different cars, the Chevy Equinox with built-in 4G LTE Wi-Fi, and the Ford Escape without.
There's no Wi-Fi. It doesn't even work. I wish I had chocolate chip ice cream. No, raspberry. Chocolate chip.
Keep your legs down.
Raspberry chip.
Eden, put your leg down, please.
This is a nice ride. Beautiful day.
You really need to keep your legs down. Oh, I can't.
I don't think I've ever heard our kids this quiet before.
What do you guys think? Should we plan to get this for our car?
Okay. We're feeling sad.
Hey, look, guys, we're back.
I didn't even think we were moving.
Welcome back.
Thanks.
So, what'd you guys think of the Chevy Equinox?
It was so quiet. So quiet.
That was awesome.
Yeah?
We want to go back in the car.
Oh, what a vision of the future. Turn your children into drones plugged into headphones in the back seat.
Right, I mean, so is the moral
Jesus
of the story,
Christ.
let's not talk to each other while we're on the road, right?
And if they were my kids, they'd be streaming HD video and my data plan would be absolutely wanked within 5 seconds.
So, American marketing at its finest. Ted?
Well, I would say actually what they should have done was they should have put a price tag at the end of that commercial as to how much it would cost for the data to keep your car that docile. Because the data isn't cheap. I mean, you know, it's very expensive, and it's in Canada. I know in the U.S. if you're an AT&T subscriber, it's a different case. But here in Canada, they've partnered with all the 3 major carriers here, so it works regardless of who you're with here. But you can't share that data with your smartphone here. Unfortunately, I don't know how they'll make that work out, but. So if you want that kind of experience, even just every weekend, you have 2 kids on Netflix, that data's gone in one drive. So you're gonna be spending hundreds of dollars probably to get that kind of experience. So I don't know. I suppose you could torrent. Not that I would say you should, but you know, you could do that too. Torrent.
And that's why broadcast radio is our trump card. I know we've talked a lot about connectivity, and we always assume digital dashboards equals streaming, but it doesn't. It equals great user experience, personalized user experience, bright logos, but doing the heavy lifting, the audio playback over the air. Good old AM, FM, DAB in Europe still has a big part to play here.
And just think about things like, of course, in that commercial, nothing buffered, they never drop the signal, never happens, you know, you never lose that 4G signal ever. And actually, I think one other thing to just, and maybe it's off tangent just a bit here, but one thing to keep in mind with automotive and all of this is, and every time you see one of the digital dashes, is the safety aspect. And if you think that broadcasting is a heavily regulated industry, whether it's the CRTC, the FCC in the US. You ain't seen nothing compared to automotive. And at least in the US, you're supposed to no more than 2 seconds looking at that center stack, at that dashboard, at that screen. There are a lot of issues with that. That's also the issues with Apple and Google and everybody else, and all that comes into play. It is incredibly regulated, and when it isn't regulated, there are lots of lawyers looking to make some nice fat fees.
You know, it's interesting you mentioned that because one of the disconnects between the consumer electronics world and the automotive world is one of the goals of the consumer electronics, albeit Apple or Google or whether it's an iPad, their goal is to keep you looking at that screen for a long period of time and be happy looking at it and be satisfied. The goal in automotive is that you don't look at that screen very often, hardly if ever, or it's almost very natural that you're able to get to these features. So at the root of it, they've got different goals, right? So now can we get to the place where you need to be? Yeah, but it's interesting, the two environments have at their core a different place that they start from.
And radio strength is that we work on an audio level.
Yeah.
So you can keep your eyes on the road and you can interact with these things, and the systems can use voice feedback and you can use voice control on them as well.
Yeah.
That's where we need to be headed, thinking more about the whole sound experience, including knitting radio content into that.
Well, and there are the newer digital forms of broadcast do have some video content to them. Not video, but you can see the play art, some different things, so there's different aspects to it.
So we're not even going to touch autonomous driving here because that's another terrifying topic of maybe your eyes don't need to be on the road. Well, yeah, you guys are well down the road with that. I mean, your whole thing is there. So we don't have time for that. I want to end it in the time that we have remaining to talk about how radio broadcasters can remain relevant in cars. I mean, obviously it's the #1 location, #1 revenue source, and yet consumers are looking at this kind of madness. And how does a radio station still stand out in a sea of infinite competition and all these sources? What's your best advice for all these programmers and DJs and managers out here who all of a sudden now have all this competition in the dashboard? What should they be thinking? That's an easy one, right?
Okay, I'll jump in with 2 things. Keep your content brilliant. I was listening to Q107 this morning here. Absolutely fantastic breakfast show. Live travel reports from a traffic chopper. Fantastic, really entertaining, really informative. But when you're talking to car companies, when we're lobbying them for the right interfaces, for keeping AM and FM radio in dashboards, we have to do it together. We're a small industry at best. You can't do it as one company, you can't do it as one country, you have to do it as a continent. So that's why we've got together in Europe with Radio Player, and that's why you guys need to get together and work out the message you're going to give as the radio industry to the car companies.
So brilliant content, speak in one voice. We're running out of time, but I want to make sure that you all have a shot at this.
Yeah, I would just say stay relevant. I mean, it's like any company or any industry, right? If you have the content or you're providing a value that the consumer wants, they're going to find a way to get to you. But bottom line also is stay through as many pipelines of technology as you can. Broadcast radio, make sure you have some type of streaming available, and then the service providers, the OEMs, everything will find a way to get to you, even if you're out of range.
And understand this business. Panels like this are good. I mean, I came into it from nothing a few years ago. Understand where they're going. One of the things you can think about right now is you've heard about the Internet of Things. And while that may not be that relevant about having a connected refrigerator right now, think of 3 concentric circles. There's a little one in the middle, it's called radio. And radio looks out and says, oh my God, we've got to be part of the car. We have to stay relevant to that. The OEMs are looking at, they're the middle circle. They're going to be part of the Internet of Things. They're looking at how they're going to connect. They aren't worried about radio. They're looking outward. How are they going to be part of this big revolution that's coming, that you want your car connected to your home security system, to the lights in your driveway, to everything else? So understand it. Learn all you can.
Ted? Yeah, I would say don't fear the internet, embrace it, as far as how you can extend your brand. Radio, for the most part, is a scheduled medium. There are certain things that play at certain times, depending on the station. Maybe you put some of that content you already played online so that people can stream it later. That might help. I don't know, just one idea, but I think sort of a hybrid approach would definitely work if you can make it work the right way.
It's a gnarly topic. I think you guys did a great job. I mean, with only 50 minutes to try and make sense out of the connected car. Big round of applause for our panelists. Thanks to CMW, Neil Dixon and Greg Simpson for hosting us today, and our sponsor as well. We really appreciate it. Have a great conference. We're going to be hanging around, so if you have any questions or anything you want to kind of bat around with us, we'd be more than happy to take it on. So thank you very much and have a great conference.